Some people step into your life not to give you love, but to awaken the part of you that has never been loved. They carry with them a silence, not just in words, but in presence. They do not offer safety, affection, or even effort, yet something in you pulls toward them, like a tide that doesn't ask permission. It feels almost sacred, destined even, though a part of you already knows this connection will hurt. Carl Jung once said that what you don't make conscious will continue to unfold as fate. And so, when you stay drawn to someone who never sees you, never chooses you, you must ask, is this really love? Or is this the familiar pain of the past repeating itself with a new face? Not because you're naive, not because you're foolish, but because a deeper wound inside you is trying to find a resolution. This isn't emotional weakness. This is the unconscious trying to heal itself. You are not falling in love. You are falling into a memory, one that has never been completed. One where love was something to be earned, not received. A place where affection was earned through perfection, not presence. And you're hoping, if this time they love you, maybe it will prove you were always enough. There is a quiet pain that follows many people for decades, a whisper that says, I'm not enough, not good enough, not lovable enough, not worthy of being kept. And this whisper doesn't come from your current relationship. It comes from a time when you were small and still learning what love even meant. A time when being accepted meant performing, when being embraced meant being useful. Jung wrote, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents." When your parents could not express love, when they were emotionally frozen, their absence became your inheritance. Their silence became your self-worth. And so you grew into someone who chases connection even when it hurts, because your emotional blueprint was wired in scarcity. And now, you don't enter love freely. You enter love like an audition, like a person trying to prove their value before being allowed to rest in someone's arms. You love with effort, with strategy, with sacrifice. And underneath it all is the old question, what must I become in order to be chosen? But love that is earned through self-erasure is not love. It is self-abandonment, wearing the mask of devotion. You try harder, bend more, give endlessly to someone who gives you almost nothing, and still you stay. Not because they are special, but because they represent something your soul has tried to fix since you were a child. The people you are drawn to when you are unhealed are often the ones who mirror the absence you never made peace with. You fall in love with the cold, the distant, the unavailable, not because they're irresistible, but because they feel like home. A home that was never safe. A home that asked you to earn your place. Imagine a woman named Claire. As a child, she received praise only when she was impressive. Her parents rarely hugged her. When she failed, they withdrew. Now, as an adult, Claire feels a pull toward emotionally unavailable men. She sees it as desire. But it's not desire. It's memory. It's her inner child saying, if I can finally get him to choose me, maybe I'll be enough. Jung explained that the shadow is not evil. It is everything you have not yet faced. The feeling of not enough is a shadow, one that plays out in every relationship you enter until you bring it into the light. You can change the person, you can change the city, but if you don't face the wound, the story repeats. You love people who cannot love you. Not because you want to suffer, but because your psyche is still trying to win a battle. It lost long ago. You are not seeing the person in front of you. You are seeing the person behind you, the one who never said you're enough, and you're hoping that this time the ending will change. But healing does not come from convincing someone to love you. Healing comes from turning inward and whispering to yourself what you've needed to hear all along. You are already enough. Jung called this individuation, The process of becoming whole by integrating your light and your shadow, your longing and your truth. And when you begin to heal, love changes. You stop chasing. You stop shrinking. You stop needing someone to tell you that you are lovable. Because you already know. Because you already believe. That is when love begins. Not from a wound, but from wholeness. You don't have to keep searching for someone to fill the space inside you. You just have to stop abandoning yourself. The moment you say, even if they never choose me, I still choose me, is the moment you break the cycle, not with noise, but with clarity, not with anger, but with truth. That is the beginning of real love. You thought you had finally learned. After the heartbreak, the disappointment, the cold silences and broken promises, you promised yourself you wouldn't fall for that kind of person again. The one who keeps you guessing, who shows up with mystery, only to vanish without reason. And then they appear, with their stillness, their soft voice, their distance that somehow feels like gravity. And before you know it, you're back. This isn't weakness. This isn't foolishness. This is your unconscious calling something familiar. Carl Jung called it projection, the psyche's tendency to cast unresolved inner realities onto the people around us. When there is a wound inside that has not been met, not been healed, it does not fade. It seeks a stage, a symbol, a living mirror to continue the story that was never closed. You don't fall in love with who they are. You fall in love with what they represent. They feel like someone you knew long ago, someone who was never quite reachable, never quite present. Maybe a parent, maybe a caregiver, maybe the first person you ever had to work hard just to be noticed by. And now, without realizing it, you're trying again. Jung wrote, "The unconscious always seeks expression. If it is not made conscious, it will manifest as fate." This means the people you are drawn to are not always about romance. They are often manifestations of unfinished emotional business. So when someone walks into your life and you feel that intense spark, ask yourself, is this love or is this recognition of the past? Often, it's the child in you who recognizes them. That part of you who was never held long enough, seen deeply enough, affirmed strongly enough. And it's not that this new person will heal the old pain. It's that they awaken it. They become the next chapter of a story that has never been rewritten. This is why some people feel like soulmates, even if they treat you like an afterthought. Because the soul isn't searching for comfort. It's searching for wholeness. And sometimes that means being pulled toward the exact experience that hurt you, hoping this time it will turn out differently. This is the unconscious seeking resolution through repetition. Imagine you were once a child standing behind a locked door, hoping it would open, hoping someone would say, "Come in, I've been waiting," but it didn't happen. And now, years later, you meet someone who also keeps a door half shut. You wait again. You hope again, and your mind calls it destiny. But your soul knows better. Jung described this as a delay in individuation. When the ego hasn't fully accepted and integrated its past experiences, it keeps attracting opportunities to finish what was never emotionally resolved. Not because you are broken, but because the psyche longs to be whole. It wants the wound to close, even if that means bleeding one more time. This is why we keep loving people who cannot love us. Not because we lack discernment, but because our emotional map is still navigating from old coordinates. Until we reset the compass, we'll keep ending up in the same places, wondering why we feel lost. Ask yourself gently, what is keeping me from leaving? Is it love, or is it hope? Hope that if they change, it will finally prove that you are worthy. Hope that if you're just a little more patient, a little more quiet, they will wake up and see you. But that kind of hope isn't hope. It's survival. It's the child in you who still believes, if I can just be good enough, I'll be loved. But real love doesn't ask you to earn it. It doesn't offer crumbs and call them meals. And it certainly doesn't make you doubt your own heart just to stay close to someone else's. Jung wrote, "We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. Every person you feel magnetized to is another version of yourself waiting to be seen, to be held, to be healed. But if you keep trying to heal the wound through someone else, the wound only deepens, because they can't give you what they don't even give themselves. You think you're loving them, but often you're just loving the part of you that never got what it needed. And you're hoping that if they finally choose you, maybe you'll finally feel chosen by the past. But that's not how healing works. Healing doesn't come from rewriting the ending. It comes from putting the pen down and saying, this chapter doesn't define me anymore. The soul is not asking you to wait for someone who cannot love. It's asking you to stop waiting altogether, to turn inward, to see the pattern, to recognize that you are not a story that must keep looping. You are the author. And the moment you decide, I will not love from lack anymore, everything changes. That is individuation. That is the path of becoming whole. Not because someone finally gave you what you've been waiting for, but because you finally gave it to yourself. And that, Jung reminds us, is the real beginning of love. Not the kind that binds you, but the kind that frees you. There are relationships that leave you weeping, wondering, unraveling. They drain you. But still, you stay. Not because they nourish your spirit, but because they resemble something your nervous system has memorized as love. They pull you back to a feeling you can't quite name. But that has lived inside your body far longer than this person ever has. And so, you confuse the chaos for connection, and the pain for... Carl Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But what happens when that reaction only wounds you? What happens when the transformation is a slow deterioration of your sense of self? That's not chemistry. That's a trauma response, camouflaged as romance. It's not love. It's reenactment. You find yourself giving endlessly. You hold back your needs. You stay silent so they don't leave. You lower your standards. You explain away neglect. You name your suffering as sacrifice. And still, you call it love. Because that's what you were taught, that love means waiting, enduring, proving. That love is a battlefield. But real love doesn't demand you bleed just to feel worthy of being seen. Jung taught that the unconscious is always working to bring up what we've buried. It does so through dreams, symptoms, and relationships. That's why the person you're with may not be the one hurting you. They are simply the trigger, the catalyst, that activates the pain already lodged in your system. The wound is yours. The reaction is yours. They just happen to be the mirror. So ask yourself, does this love make you calm? Or does it keep you guessing? Does it feel like freedom or like performance? If love makes you lose sleep, doubt your worth, or feel like you're always one mistake away from being left, then what you're feeling is not love. It's fear. It's the ghost of your unmet needs, wearing a new face. There's a pattern that many people carry, the belief that love must hurt, that suffering is a sign of devotion, that struggle means value. But that belief didn't begin with your current partner. It began when you were small, when the love you needed was inconsistent, when attention came at the cost of perfection, when connection always had conditions. Jung explained that what remains unconscious becomes externalized. He said, when an inner situation is not made conscious, it appears outside as fate. That's why the same kind of relationship keeps appearing in your life. Different name, same pattern. It's not fate, it's a message. And it will keep arriving until you finally understand it's not about them. It's about you. I once listened to a woman describe a man who made her feel alive and anxious, needed and invisible. He gave her just enough affection to keep her hoping, but never enough to make her feel secure. She said, "I know he's difficult, but I think he's just scared. If I stay long enough, he'll come around." But it wasn't love she was chasing. It was her father's approval, reincarnated in his eyes. This is what Jung called symbolic reenactment, where you unconsciously place old wounds into the hands of new people, hoping they'll treat them differently. But they don't. Because you're not choosing them with your soul. You're choosing them with your trauma. And trauma always picks what feels familiar, not what feels safe. Many of us have been conditioned to confuse anxiety with affection. If we're not suffering, we don't think it's real. If we're not struggling, we don't think it's deep. And so we repeat. We stay, we sacrifice, and we call it loyalty. But that's not love. That's emotional survival, wrapped in romantic longing. You begin to heal when you ask the hardest question of all. Do I love this person, or do I love the version of myself I think I could finally be if they loved me back? Because often, it's not them we're clinging to. It's the fantasy. The idea that their love will make the ache go away. But no one can love you out of your own history. That's your work. Jung taught that the soul seeks wholeness, not repetition. And yet, we often repeat until we suffer enough to stop. Pain, he said, is the motivator for transformation. So if you're breaking, if you're falling apart, know this: it's not the end, it's the invitation. It's the turning point where the psyche finally says, no more. You must evolve. True love doesn't steal your sleep. It doesn't whisper doubt into your heart. It doesn't turn you into a version of yourself that you barely recognize. True love is quiet, solid, present. It allows you to exhale, to be, to unfold without pressure. If you've never felt that, it's not because it doesn't exist. It's because you've never believed you deserve it. And that's the healing. Realizing you don't need to prove anything to receive love. You don't need to earn your place in someone's heart. You don't need to bleed to feel beautiful. You only need to turn inward and begin giving to yourself what no one else ever did. That's when you stop searching. That's when the pattern breaks. You are not meant to suffer in the name of love. You are meant to awaken in the name of truth. And the truth is, if love doesn't feel safe, it isn't love. It's your soul crying out to be reclaimed, not by them, but by you. Have you ever found yourself staying with someone long after your heart knew it was time to leave? Not because of how much love was there, but because of the story you kept telling yourself about what could be. The story that whispered, if I just hold on a little longer, they'll change, they'll see me, they'll come around. And so you wait, not for who they are, but for who you hope they'll become. Carl Jung once wrote, "A story is the only way to make sense of what we do not understand. And when someone is distant, inconsistent, or unable to meet you emotionally, the mind refuses to accept the pain of rejection. Instead, it creates a narrative. They've been hurt, they're not ready. They love me, but don't know how to show it." And soon, the person becomes less real and more imagined. You stop loving the human in front of you and start loving the version your heart invented. The one that might appear if you just love harder, wait longer, endure a little more. You believe that if you're patient enough, they will wake up one day and choose you the way you always needed to be chosen. But what you're calling patience is often just fear. The fear of facing the truth. And what is that truth? That maybe they won't change. That maybe they aren't capable of loving you the way you deserve. That maybe this isn't love at all, but a deep emotional pattern, masquerading as destiny. Jung believed that self-deception isn't weakness, it's a defense, a psychic reflex that tries to shield us from truths too painful to hold all at once. That's why people forgive betrayal, endure coldness, and stay in situations that drain them. Not because they don't see what's happening, but because facing it would mean collapsing a hope they've carried for too long, and that collapse would feel like a loss of identity. If they don't love me, was all this for nothing? Imagine this clearly. You're standing before a door that has already closed. But instead of walking away, you press your hand to the wood and wait. You say, they just need time. If I'm loyal enough, quiet enough, strong enough, they'll return. And every day you sit there, not with love, but with longing, not in reality, but in memory, in fantasy, in a version of them that only lives inside your mind. I once heard the story of a man who loved a woman for 3 years. She never defined the relationship. She was close when she needed comfort, distant when he needed clarity. Every time she disappeared, he waited. Every time she reappeared, he forgave. He told me, she's just afraid of love. She's been hurt before. But when I asked him, do you love her, or do you love the idea that one day she'll finally choose you? He fell silent. That silence is the beginning of awakening. Because we stay, not always, because we're in love, but because leaving would mean facing that we were never really chosen. And that ache, the feeling of I wasn't enough, is too heavy to hold. So we create a story, a softer version of the truth, and we name that story compassion, faith, loyalty. But Jung warned that many neuroses come from avoiding legitimate suffering. He said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And one of the most absurd things we do is call pain love. We build a story so strong that even the evidence of our own heartbreak can't break through it. True love does not require you to abandon your dignity. It does not silence your needs or force you to find meaning in someone else's neglect. If you spend more time analyzing their behavior than experiencing joy, you are not in a relationship. You are in a trauma loop, a place where your need to be enough overrides your ability to walk away. Jung believed that healing begins when we ask, am I betraying myself in the name of love? Because many of us aren't clinging to a person. We're clinging to a dream that one day someone will prove our worth by loving us the way we've always wanted. But that's not their job. It never was. No one can heal the parts of you that you've rejected. No one can make you feel whole by showing up late with crumbs of affection. And the longer you stay in waiting, the further you drift from yourself. Not because you are unworthy, but because you've placed the task of redemption in the hands of someone who doesn't know what to do with it. You think you're being loyal, but ask yourself, would I ask a friend to stay in this situation? Would I ask a child to endure this kind of love? If the answer is no, then your loyalty is not love. It is fear. And it's okay to be afraid. But don't let fear build your future. You're allowed to walk away. Not because you stopped loving them, but because you started loving yourself. You're allowed to end the story, not in bitterness, but in clarity. You're allowed to say, this version of love is not mine anymore. And that, Jung would say, is individuation. The moment you stop chasing completion in another and begin returning to your own center. When you stop telling stories that justify pain, you begin to live in truth. And truth is where real love begins. Not the kind that begs to be noticed, but the kind that stands tall in its own light and says, I am worthy of peace. I am ready for something real. There is a quiet kind of agony that doesn't scream. It simply lingers. A dull ache in the chest, a heaviness in the eyes, a silence that grows louder every night. And often, we try to heal that ache by inviting someone else into our lives. We believe that if they love us deeply enough, we will finally feel whole. But no one can heal a wound they didn't create. No one can fill a void we formed by leaving ourselves. Carl Jung taught that the soul cannot be found outside the self. He wrote, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. And yet, many of us keep searching for that one person who will awaken us, who will hold our hands and take the ache away. But the awakening we long for is not in their gaze. It's in our own reflection. It's in facing the question we avoid. Where did I abandon myself in order to be loved by someone else? Awakening doesn't begin when a person finally chooses you. It begins when you stop waiting to be chosen, when you stop tying your worth to someone's attention, when you let go of the belief that you must be perfect to be loved. That moment when the silence is deafening and the tears come without invitation, that is the sacred beginning of healing. I once heard the story of a woman who waited nearly 6 years for a man who was never sure of her. He loved her, sometimes. He needed her, occasionally, but he never chose her. She believed that if she could be patient enough, forgiving enough, understanding enough, one day he would recognize her value, and then one day he married someone else. Not after a fight, not with explanation, just silence and a ring for someone else. But the greatest devastation wasn't the loss of him. It was the realization that she had lost herself in the waiting. Her sadness wasn't just about what he did. It was about how long she kept hoping, how much of her life had been built around the idea that if he stayed, it would mean she was lovable. And in the collapse of that dream, she began to ask, why did I abandon myself? Just to be seen? That question is the doorway to what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming your full, undivided self. Not the person you pretended to be in relationships, not the role you played to be loved, but the self that exists even when no one is watching, even when no one is loving you, even when the house is empty and the phone is silent. Individuation is not perfection. It is the acceptance of imperfection. It is the courage to stand in front of your reflection, not the physical one, but the emotional one, and say, I have wounds, I have needs, I have scars, and I will no longer punish myself for them. This is where self-reclamation begins. Not with anger, but with compassion. Picture yourself looking in a mirror that doesn't reflect your face, but your emotional truth. In it, you see all the moments you stayed when you should have left, all the silences you endured, all the times you said, I'm fine while your soul was breaking. And still, you stand there. Still, you face it. That is awakening. Jung once wrote, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. We cannot heal what we refuse to feel. We cannot transform what we deny. Pain, when met with presence, becomes a mirror, not a prison. It reveals what you've been carrying, what you've hidden, what you've sacrificed. And in that revelation, you gain something greater than peace. You gain yourself. The truth is, no one is coming to complete you. Not because you are unlovable, but because you are already complete. The more you seek others to define your value, the further you drift from your own inner truth. And the longer you stay in places where love is conditional, the more your soul forgets its own name. But here's what Jung knew. The soul never truly forgets. It waits. It whispers. It sends dreams. It nudges you in the quiet moments when no one else is around. It says, come back to me. And one day, when the cost of waiting becomes too high, when the illusion breaks, when the pain becomes too familiar, you listen. And in that moment, something shifts. You no longer need their approval to feel worthy. You no longer crave their affection to feel alive. You begin to give yourself what you spent years asking for. And this is not bitterness, it's freedom, the kind that grows from knowing you can stand alone and still feel whole. You no longer fall in love to prove something. You love to share something. You no longer need someone to chase you to feel chosen. You are already chosen by your own heart. And from that place, love changes. It becomes mutual, gentle, honest. It becomes a home you don't have to build from desperation. If you are at the breaking point, if the illusions are crumbling, let them. Don't rush to rebuild. Don't seek to replace the pain with another person. Sit with yourself. Walk through the wreckage, because what rises from that space will not be the version of you that begged to be seen. It will be the version that finally sees herself. This is the fire Jung spoke of. Not the kind that destroys, but the kind that purifies. And in its flame, everything that was false will fall away. You'll no longer beg to be loved. You'll become love. Not because someone chose you, but because you finally chose yourself. Healing begins the moment you stop trying to prove you are lovable. It begins when you finally understand that the right person cannot make up for the places inside you that you've long abandoned. You've mistaken affection for evident. You've waited for someone's attention to confirm what your soul has been aching to believe. I am enough. But true healing doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself first, especially when no one else does. Carl Jung wrote, "Individuation means becoming an individual, and insofar as individuality embraces our innermost uniqueness, it also implies becoming one's own self. This means you are not here to shape yourself into someone else's ideal. You are here to become whole, not through their gaze, but through your own awakening. The journey back to yourself is not loud. It doesn't always begin with triumph. It often begins with exhaustion. With the whisper, 'I can't do this anymore.' There comes a moment when you stop trying to fix them. You stop explaining away their absence. You stop asking, 'What more can I do?' and begin asking, 'Why do I feel I need to do anything at all just to be loved?' And when that question lands, it opens something in you. A memory, a wound, a familiar script you've lived over and over again. You are never meant to be the one who carries the weight of someone else's emotional absence. You are never meant to convince anyone of your worth. You are not born to perform for love. You are born to live, to feel, to connect, not to shrink yourself just to keep someone from walking away. That's the illusion many of us live under. If I am more gentle, more forgiving, more understanding, they will stay. But their staying isn't love if it requires you to disappear. Their presence isn't a blessing if it costs you your truth, and you're not being patient. You're being silent in the face of self-betrayal. Jung warned that the unconscious can seduce us into repetition. It convinces us that if we just get it right this time, if we win this one person over, the ache from the past will finally vanish. But it doesn't. It deepens. Because healing doesn't happen by winning the love of the unavailable. Healing happens by walking away from those who require you to sacrifice your soul. So many of us are not in love. We are in emotional debt. We give more than we have, hope harder than we should, and call that devotion. But what it really is fear. Fear that if we stop trying, we'll be forgotten. Fear that if we let go, we'll be empty. But the truth is, you were already running on empty long before this relationship began. And that emptiness isn't a flaw, it's a signal, a sacred message from your unconscious saying something needs to be healed. Not out there, not in them, in you. That's where the work begins. That's where the pattern ends. You are not weak for wanting love, but you must be careful of what you call love. If it silences your needs, makes you feel small, and keeps you in a constant state of doubt, that's not love. That's your childhood wound, asking to be seen. And the moment you recognize it, you stop blaming yourself. You stop trying to earn what should never need earning. Jung taught that our outer world is often a reflection of our inner world. When your inner self is rooted in shame or scarcity, you attract what confirms it. But when your inner world begins to heal, the people you attract will mirror that healing. They will not need you to prove yourself. They will meet you as you are. But first, you must meet yourself. Without judgment, without performance, without shame. You must say, "I forgive myself for all the times I stayed too long, gave too much, and confused pain with love." You must say, "I am allowed to stop. I am allowed to rest. I am allowed to want peace more than I want to be chosen." And when you do, when you finally return to your own heart, you'll begin to feel something you may not have felt in years. Calm. Not the silence of suppression, but the quiet of clarity. A stillness that doesn't need to chase, prove, or explain. A steadiness that says, I am here. I am enough. I am whole. You'll realize that love is not something you chase. It's something you allow. And the ones who truly see you won't need you to shrink. They won't need you to explain your worth. They'll recognize it. They'll respect it. And you will too. Not because they gave it to you, but because you finally remembered it for yourself. This is not the end of your love story. It's the beginning of the real one. The one that starts the moment you stop confusing effort with value. The one that starts the moment you stop loving from a wound and start loving from your truth. There comes a sacred moment, often quiet, often alone, when the pain no longer pulls you toward them. When the silence you once filled with anxious hope starts to feel like peace. Not because they changed, not because the story ended the way you wanted, but because you changed. You finally stopped searching for healing in someone else's hands. That is the true beginning of freedom. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But to do that, you must first face all the roles you've played. The pleaser, the fixer, the one who waits, the one who endures. These roles weren't your truth. They were survival. You wore them like armor, hoping to be chosen. But when you no longer need to be picked to feel worthy, the armor becomes unnecessary. You begin to live without performance. You stop rewriting red flags as signs of potential. You stop naming silence as patience. You stop bending your voice to make room for someone who never asked how you feel, because now you see it clearly. It was never about being good enough. It was about remembering you were already whole. That wholeness isn't proven in someone else's eyes. It's known in the quiet chambers of your own soul. There's a peace that comes when you no longer need the apology, when you no longer crave the closure because you've given it to yourself. The moment you say, I deserved more, without bitterness, that is when your spirit begins to lift. That is when the wound becomes wisdom. That is when the past no longer dictates your worth. You look back, not with anger, but with understanding. Not everything was love. Some of it was longing. Some of it was fear. Some of it was you trying to heal through the presence of someone who was never capable of seeing the real you. And still, you forgive yourself. Not because you were wrong to love, but because you were brave enough to try. Jung taught that the shadow, the unseen part of us, holds not only our pain but our power. When you finally see the parts of yourself you rejected, the needy one, the angry one, the afraid one, and you love them anyway, you stop projecting them onto others. You stop attracting relationships that echo what you haven't yet embraced. You begin to love from a different place, a place that doesn't fear loss, a place that doesn't confuse intensity with connection. You start to love without needing someone to prove anything. Because love, when it's real, doesn't ask for your suffering. It asks for your presence. And from here, you no longer mistake chaos for passion. You no longer chase silence, trying to win noise. You no longer give yourself away in exchange for crumbs. Because you now understand, what I tolerate teaches others how to treat me. What I choose reflects how I feel about myself. You remember the truth you forgot when you were a child. That love doesn't live in punishment. That affection isn't something you earn by staying quiet, small, or endlessly understanding. Love is not built on endurance. It's built on truth. And truth always starts within. This is the awakening Jung spoke of. Not the kind that happens in grand gestures, but in simple decisions, like choosing not to text, like choosing to walk away, like choosing to grieve the dream rather than keep living the illusion. These are not signs of weakness. These are signs of growth. You might still miss them. You might still ache. But now you know what the ache is. It's not about them. It's about you remembering the part of you that stayed too long, gave too much, loved too hard in places that could not hold it. And now, that part of you is returning home. You become the one who stays, not for them, but for yourself. You become the one who chooses, not with fear, but with clarity. You become the one who loves, not to be validated, but because you are no longer afraid of being alone. Because solitude no longer feels like punishment. It feels like peace. And maybe one day, someone will come who sees you clearly, who does not make you wait to be worthy, who holds you gently, not because you earned it, but because they are ready. And you will not mistake them for healing. You will not need them to be medicine. You will simply meet soul to soul, not from lack, but from fullness. Until then, let every no you give be a yes to yourself. Let every silence you walk away from be an echo of your growth. Let every time you choose peace over passion be a sign that the pattern has ended. The story has changed. The soul has awakened. There will come a day when your love no longer leaks from an old wound. When you no longer see relationships as a means to fix what someone else broke long ago. When love is not a rescue mission, not a search for redemption, not a quest to prove you are finally enough. That day begins not with someone else's arrival, but with your return to yourself. Carl Jung taught that the self is not only the center, but also the whole circumference, which embraces both consciousness and the unconscious. This means the self is not a part of you. It is the entire, indivisible truth of who you are. The you that feels, the you that hides, the you that dreams, the you that remembers. Healing begins when you stop trying to edit that truth and instead begin to embrace it. You are not here to perform. You are not here to chase. You are not here to shrink so that someone else can feel tall beside you. You are here to live fully, not cautiously, to love openly, not desperately, to be chosen, not begged for. When your self-worth is intact, love is no longer something you barter with pain. It becomes an offering, not a plea. That is what healing gives you. Choice. The choice to walk away when your soul whispers this is not home. The choice to rest without apology. The choice to be alone without feeling abandoned. Because when you are rooted in your own soul, you realize that solitude is not emptiness. It is sacred space. You stop craving the ones who confuse you. You stop longing for the ones who disappear. You stop trying to be the exception to someone's indifference. You start choosing what matches your healing, not your trauma. You start asking, does this connection bring me peace, or does it make me beg for crumbs in the name of love? And if it's the latter, you let go. Not out of bitterness, but out of alignment. You realize that no matter how much you love them, you are no longer willing to betray yourself. You are no longer willing to carry a love that was never carried for you. That's not harshness. That's maturity. That's growth. That's individuation. There will still be grief. You will still feel the ache, but this grief is clean. It's not tangled in fantasy or illusion. It's the grief of returning to yourself, of realizing how far you wandered just to be seen. And it's okay. That was the journey. But now you are home, and your heart, after all it has carried, deserves your loyalty most of all. Real love feels like a soft exhale. It does not demand performance. It does not ask you to dim your light. It does not make you question your reality. Real love sees you as you are, and chooses you there. And you will not have to fight for it. You will not have to bleed to deserve it. You will simply rest in it. And it will feel like breathing. And if you are still on the journey, still unraveling the old patterns, still tempted to reach for what you know will hurt, be gentle. Be patient. As Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Every no you speak, every boundary you hold, every silent step away from the wrong person is a step toward the self. This is not a race. This is not a performance. This is the slow, sacred work of becoming whole, of gathering the parts of you left behind in people, in memories and stories that were never yours to carry. This is the quiet reclaiming of your own soul. So the next time you find yourself wondering if they'll choose you, pause, breathe, and ask instead, am I choosing me? Am I choosing peace over potential, clarity over confusion, truth over illusion? Because that choice, that one sacred choice, is the beginning of everything new. You don't need their love to feel whole. You don't need their attention to feel seen. You don't need their approval to be valuable. You are not a wound waiting to be healed by someone else. You are the healer. You are the love. You are the home you've been searching for. And when you love from that place, that grounded, unshakable truth, you will no longer chase. You will no longer prove. You will no longer hope someone sees your worth. You'll already know it. And from there, the only love you'll accept is the love that knows it too.